9, 8, 7, 6, 5. It is 7:01 p.m. on Monday, April 20th, 2020. Good evening. I call to order this regular meeting of the Richfield School Board, coming to you live from our homes all across Richfield. Attending this evening's virtual board meeting are board members Paula Cole, Christine Malik, Tim Paulus, Allegra Smishek, and Peter Tensing, and I am Crystal Brackey. I'm thrilled that we have student board members Diane Maceo and Naomi Ferguson with us this evening, as well as Superintendent Unowski and several district staff members who you will hear from later in the agenda. This meeting is taking place virtually as allowed by Minnesota State Statute 13D.021 in light of the peacetime state of emergency declared by Governor Walz due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we are still adjusting to this new way of meeting, we ask for your continued patience and grace as we continue to get used to conducting our board work virtually. We are going to build on the success of our first online meeting 2 weeks ago by implementing just a few small changes tonight that we hope will make conversation feel slightly more organic while still maintaining the structure that we know is necessary in this virtual environment. So if you have feedback for us while watching at home, please do let us know. I would love to hear from you as the board chair after the meeting tonight. My contact information is on the richfieldschools.org website, along with tonight's full agenda and board packet. As we conduct this meeting from our homes, we will all stay focused on Richfield Public Schools' mission statement that we inspire and empower each individual to learn, grow, and excel. And it is more important now than ever to stay centered on what we are here to do. So finally, just want to appreciate anyone following along with us online this evening or watching in the future via YouTube. Thank you so much for being with us and for your care for our schools and community. So with that, our first item of business this evening is to approve the agenda before us. As this is a routine business item, I will not individually call on board members, but rather just do an open ask for any comments or questions related to the agenda. Board members, if you have any, this is your time to come off mute and let us know. Okay, seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to move the agenda as presented?
Madam Chair, I will move the agenda as presented.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion? Okay. Our board clerk, Christine Malik, will be conducting all of our roll call votes for us this evening. So we will start off with a roll call vote to approve the agenda.
Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye. And Ms. Brackey?
Aye. The agenda is approved. Thank you. So we now move into the information and proposals non-action items section of the agenda, which this evening does have time for public comment. I did not receive any requests to make comment before this evening's meeting. So the next opportunity will be at our May 18th board meeting, which at this point we expect will continue to take place virtually until further notice. So as a reminder, I just want to reiterate what we talked about at our last meeting, which is that we as a board are committed to providing space for members of our community who wish to address the board even in this virtual environment. So we will determine the method by which comments are given based on personal preference and technology access. And I certainly am eager to ensure that members of our community who wish to participate in public comment are able to do so successfully and without barriers. So please just get in touch if you are interested in speaking with us on May 18th. The superintendent's update this evening contains 3 really important items that I know we're all excited to get to. So I will now turn things over to Superintendent Unowski.
All right, so we are going to begin with a distance learning update. And so we actually have a video that was produced for us that Scott, our videographer, is going to play for us. The student government was asked, what are your thoughts, feelings, and input about the way distance learning is going? And so I give you the opportunity to watch this video right now. While Scott is doing that, I believe there is a short, about 10-second delay between playing videos and starting things up. And so as that gets rolling, I believe we need to click on the video.
Distance learning for me has been going good. Teachers have been making themselves actively available within their office hours, and it has taught me better time management.
Hi, my name is Christina, and distance learning has been going pretty well for me. Sometimes it gets a bit difficult to ask teachers questions if you miss that conference hour, but otherwise everything has been going pretty smoothly.
It's hard to know what to expect from distance learning, but so far I've been really impressed with the teachers and how they've handled it and been consistently checking in with their students, although I do think that there has been a little bit more work assigned than normal.
So for me, e-learning has been going very well. One thing I really like about it is how you could do things at your own pace because everyone learns at a different speed. So with e-learning, you could actually take time to really comprehend the information without feeling rushed.
For me, distance learning is going pretty good. I like the fact that I have all day to do my work and I don't have a set time limit. Some of my classes, I've noticed that I've been getting more work through distance learning than I would compared to like earlier in the school year. And I also feel like the assignments could be a little bit more engaging. But other than that, everything is cool.
Hey, I just want to thank all of our teachers and admins for making e-learning work for all of us.
Hi. Well, I think distance learning has been going really well. And overall, I like that I get to work at my own pace. And I appreciate that teachers are working hard and communicating with all of their students to get us through this.
All right, so we thank our student government for the first of what we are going to try to do, which is automated video plays of some of the presentations we have. We also, I believe, have 2 of our 3 student board members. Now, we did hear from Lucy in that particular presentation. And Lucy is not here this evening with us at the moment, but we do have Diane and we do have Naomi Ferguson. And so Diane, I'm going to ask you to come off of mute and give us your thoughts on how distance learning is going. And then when she is done, we're going to go over to Naomi. So Diane, share with us what your thoughts are.
Hey everyone. So for me, distance learning at first when we had our other board meeting, that was the first day I believe, and it was like really hard for me just because it was hard to adapt. But now I feel like I know what to expect just because like I said before, my classes were already online anyway as a senior, taking college classes. Pretty much everything that you needed to expect was already given to you. So now pretty much I go at my own pace, just like everybody else said. And it's easy for me because I don't necessarily have to wake up at like 7 a.m., which was like the hardest part about school before. I get to wake up at whatever time I want and still get my work done. But usually I just get it done before noon, so then I just don't have to deal with it anymore. I like it better, I think, than physical school, but we'll see about that.
And Naomi? I'll give Naomi about 10 seconds while we wait and see if she is there.
Hello?
You are on mute, I believe. There you go.
Yeah, you're good, Naomi.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So e-learning's been going pretty good for me, as Diane would say. I do think that the workload has got heavier, but I think part of that is just if we're at school, teachers will be able to see how we're reacting to the work we're being given and if we need more time. If we need more time or something like that, but they're not able to see it while we're at home. And so I think that that's why the workload seems heavier. And also in class, it's if we don't get something done, okay, we just move it to the next day. But when we're going online, it's you have to do this by the next day. So I think that's what's hard. But I think the teachers are doing really good at communicating with us and being available for questions and stuff like that.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'm going to try to provide a summary and an overview of the things that are happening across our district so that we are all hearing some of those expansive things that have been happening in Richfield Public Schools. And then when I'm done, I will open it up to the board if there are any questions. So let's start with teachers and staff. And our teachers and staff are teaching online lessons, including holding office hours on a daily basis. They've been planning daily as individuals and teams and have at least a week of lesson plans set up and in place. And they're contacting students on a daily basis and following up for those who are struggling to provide support. We actually had individual packets that went out today. Approximately 75 packets went out with personalized documents for students to provide some individualized instructions for those families who are either requesting to have packets available or for those who are not engaging online. At the same time, our teams have been talking about grading and what are we going to do with grading specifically for our secondary schools. At present, we're planning to continue AF grading, the typical process. However, principals in secondary are reviewing some added options. They've worked together with their leadership teams and talked as teachers about what is the most supportive of our kids. They decided as a rule that they're going to examine every student who is at a D or an F if they are not succeeding and try to figure out what are those reasons and that they're actually grading based on proficiency, not based on access. And in those situations, have the option provided to students of pass-fail grading. There have been in the past some very rigid rules from the NCAA around grading and people's eligibility, both for scholarships and participation. And as of just a day or so ago, those actually got loosened. And so I anticipate the secondary teams who met as a leadership team just earlier today coming out with some new guidelines as they examine grading and as things continue to develop, because obviously we have new information coming all the time. The high school has communicated to students and families about graduation, and they're talking about ways to celebrate the class of 2020, which obviously will be a very different situation than we've had in the past. We have worked to create some lawn signs, and there are some votes as to what would be the most supportive, and they've asked for votes from kids and families so that there are lawn signs to support our seniors. They've created an online senior spotlight on our students to show and focus on some of the things our students are doing, and launched a class of 2020 Instagram page. And they're looking at different options for graduation as there are just a wide range of things that are occurring out there in the world. Our teams are working very rigorously on attendance and then also engagement. And it's very important to separate what is attendance, which is actually being present, and what is engagement, which is actually about learning. So the good news is that average daily attendance is very similar to the regular school year, well over 90%, and typically between 90 and 95% of our students are connecting on a daily basis. And we have it down to fewer than about 60 students haven't engaged at all at this time. So there's 60 students we are trying to figure out 11 days into distance learning. And so for that group, we're doing home visits in addition to phone calls, emails, and other things that we've done. And what we're doing for the larger group is we're making sure that students, we're moving from beyond just students being present to making sure that we're really pushing and supporting learning. And so when you hear from our students talking about the additional workload, I'm sure, as Naomi pointed out, that is also because they may not be in class, so some of the class learning is actually also occurring online. An update on food. So we are serving over 2,000 meals a day at our sites and also delivered through buses throughout our community. We are serving lunch and breakfast, which is prepared by our nutrition team. We're also distributing boxes of food from our partners at Sheridan Story. One of our other partners, Beacons, is also beginning distribution of food boxes later this week to those enrolled in the program who are also asking and registering for more food. We have 3 sites providing childcare to what the government has decided as Tier 1, which is emergency care workers, and then also Tier 2 within Richfield, those who are going back as essential workers. And we have an average enrollment in our childcare of 51 students. Our health center has begun reopening and is available over the phone on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then we're also providing a system and structure of social emotional support. 1,764 kids and families were contacted by our outreach team during the first week alone. They've provided support, engagement, and resources to families. They're having daily check-ins with students, office hours, and we're continuing social emotional presentations in classes, system-wide communications, and also telemental health supports as individuals and as groups. So our SEL team members, in addition to our teachers, are making sure that they're doing individual and group work with all of our students. So as we talked about as we were launching, we are doing everything that we can to provide that comprehensive Richfield Public Schools program across all of the things that we're doing. So with that, I'm going to pause, having summarized what we're doing as Richfield Public Schools, turn things back to see if there are any questions. And I think Crystal will lead that component.
Yes, I will. And Diane and Naomi, thank you so much for sharing already. Actually, as the video was playing, one of my favorite things was seeing the reactions on your faces as you got to see and hear from your classmates. It was really incredibly sweet just to watch the two of you watching them. So because this is all about our student experiences, I want to actually start and see if there's anything else that the two of you wanted to share before the rest of the board goes. So Diane, I'll look to you first. Is there anything else that you want to share with us related to learning or just the student experience overall right now?
I just have a question. Is there a plan yet to turn in like books, like my econ book and like English books and stuff like that?
So at the moment, we are waiting to see what's going to happen. I want you to keep in mind, and this is what's very hard, that distance learning is actually scheduled at this time to end as of May 4th and go back to school on May 5th. Now, before you get excited, that doesn't actually mean that that's what's going to happen. But if we follow the pattern of the way the governor has announced things, and he has a session still at 2 o'clock every day, round about a week from Wednesday, a week from Thursday, or a week from Friday, I would anticipate an announcement from the governor to tell us, are we going to go back to school or will we be extending distance learning? And so we have talked as an admin team about what we might do for, we'll say, something like finals or something at the end to assess all of the learning that you have done. At the same time, then figuring out how to collect all of the Chromebooks, all of the textbooks, and all of the things that are out there in a way that both supports our students' learning to the last day, but also supports us getting those back. And so we're kind of working those two pieces out together.
And Naomi, is there anything else that you wanted to share or ask?
Okay, so I have one question. If we do get to go back to school, are we gonna have like new protocols or safety measures put in place?
I would assume that if we go back, there will be some form of new protocols. Right now they're recommending 6 feet apart, and they are recommending masks, and they're recommending that no more than 10 people in a small place. So obviously, if they don't change those expectations, we actually can't have a classroom of students. So whatever the governor does decide, and what I have learned in this is to try not to guess, because that makes it really challenging, is that the governor would have to expand us to having at least 30 kids in a classroom. And if we were to have masks, then we would have to assess whether or not we could have masks for all our students in Richfield Public Schools. We'd have to assess how do we do things in a safe way before we were able to relaunch school. Or there would have to be a new set of guidelines from the government about how kids are safe in school before we would be able to do that. So yes, I just don't know what they would be.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're gonna give each board member time for questions and or comments. And what we're gonna do this meeting is have board members sort of pass the metaphorical microphone on to the next board member once they are done or have passed, if they don't have anything that they would like to ask or share. And we're gonna do this in alphabetical order by last name. So Paula Cole is up first, and we'll pass it on from there. Paula.
Thank you. I really liked watching the video yesterday a few times, especially making connections about my life here as a Hello? I'm back. Sorry, So anyway, I don't know where this got cut off, but I really appreciated watching the video a few times and making connections about home life. And I also appreciate the email updates that I've been receiving, and also seeing the ones that all staff is receiving, because I think that communication is really important. So thank you. Pass the mic to Christine.
Thank you, Paula. I would just echo, it was fun to watch the video. It is really nice to have that feedback from the students to see how it's going for them. And that is about all I have to say. So we will go to Mr. Paulus.
Thank you, Christine. I also love the video. I found them to be a very impressive group of students. And I did wonder, there has to be a group of students out there who have a less flowery view of how it's been going. And I would like to hear from them, although some of the information the superintendent provided on how the outreach team has been working and connecting with students does fill in some of that. I just, as a parent, I know my student at home has found her flow and is going after her work and getting it done in a regular, pretty consistent time window, and I've enjoyed that. I hope that's happening at many homes. I know it's not happening at every home, but that I hope we're doing what we can to help our students find the success. I will pass to Ms. Smishek.
Thank you. I also appreciated the feedback from the video, and my question is, what are some other ways that we are currently or planning to collect feedback from students and caregivers on the distance learning experience so that teachers can adjust instruction, or we can adjust what we're offering in terms of support?
So I'm guessing that is a response moment, so I'm going to do that. We do have a distance learning survey going out to gather feedback and information from both students and parents. I would say informally, and you heard it touched on a little bit in the video, the area that we are working in. So I feel like we did a very good job of launching a systemic program within Richfield Public Schools, a comprehensive schooling-based program. And the area that we're getting the most feedback is aligning our instruction. Really, shrinking lessons is one of the first things that we have really gained feedback on, that a mini lesson really has to be mini. Typically, a mini lesson in a classroom can be up to 15 minutes. I would say a mini lesson on a video shouldn't be much more than 5. And then in a mini lesson, you try not to do too many instructions at the same time in a classroom. And if you do it on video, it's even harder. And so really, we have actually realigned our QComp team, which are the peer mentors to our staff, and they are now providing coaching, feedback, and instruction in our classrooms. And all of our instructional coaches are actually observing lessons and giving feedback. And so in addition to the distance learning survey, we've already gotten some feedback about, really doing a lot of alignment and improvement of instruction, because let's be real with each other. Our teachers were experts in classroom instruction, and all of them have now 2 weeks and 1 day in distance learning instruction. And so this is a brand new career experience for all of our teachers who are trying incredibly hard to do something and have turned their systems on a dime. And that is the area. That's the area we're getting pretty consistent feedback across our system that should be our continued focus, is quality improvement.
Thank you. And I will pass it to Director Tensing.
All right, thank you very much, Allegra. And I think the questions I had have all been asked, and I just simply can echo the appreciation that everyone has already articulated. And yeah, I'm just really pleased and proud with the resilience that our students are showing and the dedication of the staff. So thank you all very much. Ms. Brockie.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really great to see and hear about some of the efforts that are being made to really celebrate our students, in particular, knowing how challenging emotionally and physically some of these changes have been for them over the last month to 2 months. And so I'm excited to see some of these efforts continue, and even saw a really cool picture that somebody had shared of a STEM student who had a birthday, and their front lawn was covered in all of these beautiful signs from the Richfield STEM School wishing her a happy birthday. And so I just think continuing to challenge ourselves and really think about how do we stay connected and how do we help celebrate and ensure that our kids feel supported and feel special at this really challenging moment. And the same goes, of course, for their families and communities. Also really appreciate just the comment that was made about the fact that, yes, there is a not insignificant number of students that we've had no contact with since school restarted. And the efforts that are already underway to try to continue new strategies and trying new ways of being in touch just to make sure that people are safe and are getting what they need, not just educationally, but in all aspects of life. So thank you for that. I will now do just a final open call for any comments or questions before Steve transitions to the next item in the superintendent update. Okay, I don't see or hear anything. So Steve, turning it back to you.
All right, so Scott is going to cue things up as I talk. So we have our special education unduplicated child count. And so what we are trying to do is tape presentations in advance of the board meeting so that we can get them clean for our board meeting and make them easier. So this is our, we'll say it, dress rehearsal in real time to see how this goes. And so Dr. Clarkson will be presenting today on special ed unduplicated child count, which Scott can start at any point.
Good evening. My name's Dr. Mary Clarkson, and I am here tonight to present on special education unduplicated child count. Unduplicated child count is calculated by the Department of Education December 1st each year. And what unduplicated child count is the count of students that are receiving special education services in any district as of December 1st. So in Richfield Public Schools, we had 824 resident students that were eligible and receiving services as of December 1st. Of those students, not all of them were receiving their services within Richfield. They were just our resident students. We had 780 students that were receiving services from Richfield Public Schools. And of that 780, 112 of those students were open enrolled within into Richfield. We have 156 resident students that are receiving their special education services elsewhere. 26 of those students were receiving their services in Intermediate 287, which is a partner district of ours that provides specialized programming for students with more complex special education needs, and then also provides services for some care and treatment programs, court-placed programs, and an alternative learning center. So we had 16 students that were placed by Richfield Public Schools into their specialized programs for students with disabilities. And we have 10 students that are choosing to attend their alternative learning center. And these are all children with disabilities. As of December 1st, we did not have any students with disabilities attending their court-placed programs or their day treatment. The remaining 130 Richfield resident students that were receiving their special education services elsewhere were either open enrolled into other districts or receiving them through the private school. This graph here shows the child count over the last 5 years, and you will see that while the district's enrollment has decreased slightly, we have seen an increase in the number of children eligible for and receiving special education services. It's about a 1.5% increase. When we look at ethnicity in special education, we're comparing them to the overall ethnicity of the district. And as you can see, we identify fewer white students as needing special education services in Richfield in comparison to the overall percentage of white students that identify as white in the district. And conversely, we identify a larger percentage of students that identify as Black as needing special education services in comparison to the overall percentage of students that identify as Black in the district. When you look at Hispanic, Asian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, or 2 or more races, all of those are more aligned with the district percentage. When we look at demographics, we're looking at overall diversity, English language learners, and free and reduced, students that are eligible for free and reduced. And in all three of these areas, when compared to the district percentage, we have a higher percentage of students receiving special education services in each of these categories. Just for 1 minute, the areas where we're identifying fewer students as needing special education services are in the areas of emotional behavioral disorders, other health disabilities, and speech language. The last area that we look at is a comparison of the percentage of students that are receiving special education services in Richfield compared to our neighboring districts and districts with similar demographics. And we compare the growth in special education over the past 5 years. And as you can see, Richfield has seen an increase, and so have the majority of other districts are seeing an increase in students qualifying for special education services. The only district that shows a decrease is Minneapolis. So some key points that I want to just reiterate from the presentation is that we are seeing an increase in students that are in need of special education services over the past 5 years. Richfield has seen about a 1.5% increase. The district, when looking at the state average compared to the district average, or the state percentage of students receiving special education services in a categorical area compared to Richfield, we are seeing that we identify fewer students in the areas of emotional behavioral disorders, other health disabilities, and speech language. And conversely, Richfield has identified a larger percentage of students needing services in the area of developmental delay, which is early childhood special education, autism, specific learning disabilities, and low incident. When we look a little closer at the areas where we're seeing a difference in the percentage of students that are qualifying for services, and we disaggregate that data a little bit more, we are noticing that when looking at specific learning disabilities, 61% of our students that qualify in the area of specific learning disabilities are students who identify as Hispanic, and compared to the district percentage, which is around 40% of our student population that identify as Hispanic. And of that 61%, there's a higher percentage of students that are qualifying for not only special education, but our English language learners. When we also look at our students that are receiving services for special education, we know that we have a higher percentage of students who identify as Black that are eligible for special education services. And when we break that down even further, while we do identify a lower percentage of students in comparison to the state in the area of EBD, emotional behavioral disorders, in Richfield, 38% of our students who qualify for EBD are students who identify as Black, in comparison to the district percentage of students who identify as Black, which is around 14.5 or 15%. So what have been the focus areas for special education? Just like I presented last year, we are continuing to further develop our student teacher assistance teams within each building. We've been working very hard to ensure that every building has a multidisciplinary team, student assistance team, and that each building is working on developing tiered systems of supports and providing both academic and behavioral interventions that are specifically designed to address skill deficits. We want to make sure that we're implementing those interventions with consistency and fidelity, and that we're also collecting data to determine if these interventions are working for individual students. So that has been an ongoing work in progress over the past 2 years, that has been a big focus for the district. We also know that our speech language clinicians last year had worked very hard to develop pre-referral interventions for students that were demonstrating some deficits in the area of speech language. They trained staff on these interventions, on providing these interventions, and what we've been seeing is a decrease in the number of students that are needing to be evaluated for special education services in the area of speech language. We also know that this is not, this next area is not unique to Richfield Public Schools. It's an area that across the state that we're seeing some challenges, and that's in our evaluation and identification process for students, our English language learner students, and evaluating in the area of specific learning disabilities. We know that we need to examine our referral process and our evaluation practices for our multi-language learners to ensure that we are truly identifying the students that have a learning disability versus those that are still working on language acquisition, and that we are continuing to partner with Dr. Wilhite and her team, and are also beginning to reach out to other districts to see if we can all come together and examine as a wider group what our practices are and refine those to ensure that we are truly identifying the students in need of special education services in the categorical area of learning disability. And as a system, we know that we need to continue to provide staff development in the areas of social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, and restorative practices. This is that tier 1. Do we have good, consistent tier 1 services for all students, and are developing the skills of our teachers to support the social emotional well-being of all of our learners? So with that, I am finished with my presentation and am open to any questions you may have. Thank you.
So we will turn things over to Director Cole first, who can come in if there are any questions.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. In looking to the breakdown by ethnicity, a couple things I find very concerning is how 68% of males versus 32% of females are being classified. And I know you mentioned a lot of these things, but I really want to bring up also concerns about EBD diagnosis for Black students is 38% as opposed to 22% for white students and 20% Hispanic. This is really worrisome. And then in thinking about the learning disabilities, I want us to focus too in English learners and how that could have an impact in how we are testing them. Same thing for speech language, which I think that one is kind of easier to not make a mistake on our part, but it's still a thing, especially because when you are making sounds, your home language may have an effect, and those are some things that I will be following up in the next few weeks. And thank you as always for the very thorough report.
Yes, I know that we as a district and across the state are continued to be challenged with our identification process of our multi-language learners. And it's hard to really parcel out what is the students' language development and language acquisition versus truly a disability. And a specific learning disability, and we, I would like to believe that it's, not, or just not Richfield, but this is an ongoing challenge across several districts and across the state as a whole. Every time I go down to MDE, this is a topic that is brought up often, is trying to refine our evaluation process for our multi-language learners.
Thank you. And I'll pass it to Christine.
Thank you, Paula. I really like the list of focus areas that you provided at the end. That is really helpful to see where we're focusing our energy, especially on the dual identified students and what you just talked about in response to Paula's question. I think some of the things I would be interested in are some comparisons to previous years. So none of these things are a big shock because we've seen it before, but I think I'd be interested in seeing how we're doing, if there are areas we've improved in from last year or the year before, and also how we kind of compare to similar districts. More than that, I'd be interested in how if we're improving, if we're staying the same, or if things are kind of going the wrong way. And let's see. And I think the other things that I had you addressed, one other thing is I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about the multidisciplinary student teacher assistant team. You kind of touched on it, but I'm kind of interested in what that is and how you're bringing it together, and maybe a little more detail on what they do.
Certainly. So I can address your first two questions, or the first questions about how our comparison from last year to this year. That's the data I was able to pull. We know that we have improved in our identification of students receiving services in the area of EBD, in particular our Black students. So a year ago, we identified about 41.5% of our students in the area of EBD were identified as Black, and this year we're at 38%. So we're making some progress. And in the area of specific learning disabilities, I have the overall percentage of students that identify as Hispanic. We, a year ago, had 59%. And this year, unfortunately, we have gone up, so 61%. So we know that this is a continued area for us to work through. I don't have the specifics around our dual identified, our students that identify as multi-language learners and special ed, but I can get that information. When it comes to our multidisciplinary student teacher assistance teams, these teams have been around in buildings in some form or another for many years. What we've been working on over the last couple years is really systematizing these teams and making sure that they are all functioning in a similar fashion across the district. So every building, the first thing we did is call them the same thing, student teacher assistance team, and they're made up of a variety of educators in a building that have different expertise. So our social workers, our school psychologists in some buildings, regular ed teachers, counselors, special education teachers all come together as a team, and their sole purpose is to look at individual students that are being challenged in some way in school, either behaviorally, academically, or in some other area, and to try to develop a plan to assist the student in becoming successful and providing sometimes interventions. And so that is the purpose, and the hope is that with solid interventions and good Tier 1 instruction and a variety of interventions, we will not be referring as many students onto special education, and students will get their needs met. So that's the purpose of that every building has a team. They all have the same name for the team, and they're all working towards a similar goal. They're all at different places depending upon which building you're in. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yes, it does. Just one quick follow-up question.
Sure.
So, is there anything specific that you think that you did or changed that caused that little bit of a drop in the EBD identification of Black identified students?
I think part of what we have done is really looked at social emotional learning and providing more of those interventions prior to students being referred to special education. So when you have students that are demonstrating unexpected behaviors in school, at times it's really easy to say, oh, you know what, this student may have special education needs, let's refer them. And we have really pushed to say, no, we have a variety of interventions that we can provide prior to determining if an evaluation needs to happen. So I think really the social emotional work that we have been doing and our student engagement specialists we're starting to see some benefits of that model.
Good, that's great to hear. Thank you, Mary. And we will go on to Mr. Paul.
This is Christina. I don't know if I'm able to add to that really quickly.
Please do. Absolutely.
Okay. The only other, I was texting Mary and G-chatting her. The only other thing is we've really been utilizing Innocent Classroom in the stat process as well. So when we talk about a student, we lead with what that student's good is, and then help to identify adults in the building that can partner with the child successfully and speak to that child's good. And I think that's really helped too to address the disparities in race across behavior referral. So just adding that, and I'm signing off.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina.
Okay, Mr. Pollock.
Thank you. Just Paula was pretty clear, and I support her thoughts that we have some groups that are disproportionately identified, and even if we had, I didn't see how we were rated in some areas compared to the state, but even if we did, I'm sure that the state struggles with this as well, and this is a systemic problem, and so we hopefully can work towards fixing that sooner rather than later. One thing that caught me, when we are higher or lower than state average in a particular category of identification, is that because are our staff experts in area A and less adept at area B, and so we catch more of A than B, or is there a third party that helps us identify? I mean, when we have a gap like that.
So what I would say is the state has set out specific criteria for students becoming eligible for any one of the disability areas. So I wouldn't say that we have greater expertise in determining whether a student qualifies or does not qualify in a particular area. What I would say is that and I would also say that it's a multidisciplinary team that comes together to evaluate. So it's not just one person doing the evaluation, it's a whole team to determine. What I would say is that there are certain categorical areas, such as emotional behavioral disorders, such as autism, that the criteria is more subjective than in other areas. So in both emotional behavioral disorders and in autism, it's based on checklists and more observation. And so that is more open to a person's purview, their perceptions, whereas deaf, hard of hearing, or physically impaired is much more concrete and has real measurable standards. So I think that plays a role in. I wouldn't say it's around expertise. The other thing that we don't have a lot of control over is if a student moves in and has already been identified as receiving special education in a particular area, they have already gone through that evaluation process, and may or may not meet our standards within Richfield. So I hope that somewhat answers your question, Tim.
It does. Thank you. Also relating to those categories, or if we're seen as specializing in one area over another, I'd be curious to see how the students from other districts that have enrolled with us break down compared to our total, and also how those who left us. I mean, I understand, that it's possible that people leave us for a number of reasons, but if we're losing significantly in one of the categories, is that because we're not viewed as serving that population well enough? And if we're serving another population extremely well, are we attracting students from other districts within that? And so we'd want to be great at all of them, of course. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious if there's anything in the data that suggests we're better at one than we are at another.
So I was able to gather the information about students that have open enrolled into Richfield, and by disability and where they're attending school. And there aren't a wide variance. Like I can't say, oh, this disability area we have a higher percentage. And they are pretty well spread out across all of our schools. So it's hard to say. I know that we haven't asked parents why they have chosen to open enroll their students into Richfield. So that would definitely be something we could look at. I do not have the data quite as easily available to me for students that open enroll out of the district, but that is definitely something that I will take a look at.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
That is all I have. I'll pass it to Allegra.
Thank you. I was going to ask you to elaborate on the focus areas for staff development and how they're beneficial to special education, but I got my answer in your response to Director Malik, and so I think that those are great areas for building teacher capacity to provide more interventions prior to identification. So thank you for that. I have no other questions, so I'll pass it to Director Tenzing.
All right, thanks, Allegra. So my question, Mary, again, is going to be focusing in on the gap that we saw in that EBD identification. And certainly understanding the sort of the implication that we're over-identifying African-American students in that EBD category. And what I think I'm hearing is that we feel that when we get closer to equivalence, that we would be presumably closer to reality. Is that an accurate assumption that I'm making?
We would hope that would be the case. I also know that there's a whole bunch of contributing factors for why a student may or may not be eligible. So I try not to say over-identification, but we identify more and we have to explore what the reason is for that. And
got it. Yeah, because I mean that to me was a little concerning. I was afraid that we had an assumption in there that we were over or inappropriately identifying, and I wanted us to be sure that we evaluated that assumption intentionally, because it seems to me that it would be equally disadvantageous to students if we were under-identifying. And so I just want us to just not make the assumption that the disparity is certainly a result of, I don't want us to assume that we know exactly what's driving that gap, but to be kind of thoughtful and intentional about exploring it. What do we think then is the best metric? I mean, we get these numbers, which basically tell us about the identification numbers, and so we can see these sort of aggregate gaps. But it seems that what really matters then is how the services that are delivered are impacting students and their ability to succeed. So I guess that's my question is, what do we see as the best metric for telling us when we're doing, if we think that there's some areas where we can improve, when can we say, oh yeah, we're diagnosing accurately, we're providing the right interventions, and these students are succeeding? When can we be there?
Well, that is $1 million question. And I'm not sure I have a ready answer for you on that. I know that our, one of the things that I would be looking at, and I ask this question often, is are we seeing students being able to, with the services provided, demonstrate success in school or growth on their IEP goals and objectives? And there's a multitude of ways that that is measured. Part of it is by referrals, discipline referrals. Part of that is just by looking at their goals and objectives. So I feel like programmatically, we would, again, I don't know if it's necessarily identifying, it's looking at our identification process and then looking at our service delivery model and our students seeing growth on their IEP goals and objectives, because they're all individually based. Does that, I hope,
right.
Does that?
Yeah, no, it really does, because I think what we're getting at is the challenge of this aggregate measure, when what we're really talking about is the success of these individual students. And so I think that's the piece that if there was a way to report or incorporate that particular outcome, because that's really the outcome that matters. If there was a way to report that, then that could let us know, are we, with these identification differences, is it a difference that matters, or is it a difference that is actually serving those students better than they would be served otherwise? So
I will take that back to our team and explore that further.
Excellent, thank you. And I will pass it along to Chair Brackey.
Thank you. My questions and concerns really have been covered, so I won't restate them. I think the one thing I wanted to say, I'm not sure if there were a lot of acronyms in this presentation that I'm imagining are not common language to our students who are on this call with us, or to people who might be listening. So I was sort of thinking about that, because I was thinking in particular the conversation and the reason why I pay, I would say, particular attention to the disproportionalities in EBD, which stands for emotional and behavior disabilities, right? Did I get that right, Mary? Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that one and the disproportion of our Black students in particular is always so concerning, because it can be so rooted in systemic bias and the way in which behaviors are seen and responded to, the way in which we do or do not address underlying issues that might be behind behaviors and how they are manifesting themselves in schools and classrooms. So I just wanted to make sure to say a little bit more about that disability in particular. And I think why the disproportionality there for our Black students is something that we're taking so much time and care to really talk about and focus on, though all of the disproportionalities matter and are things that we need to be addressing. So with that said, I also want to check and see if Diane or Naomi have any questions or comments that they want to share about this topic. Diane, anything for you?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, and Naomi.
I had a question. So I was wondering, are conferences or trainings held to educate staff on racial disparities? And what do they look like if that does occur?
Great question. Thank you for asking it.
That is a great question. So not just specific to special education, but we do a lot of dialogue within teacher groups and within buildings and as a district to look at implicit bias and disparities across different groups. And we, every year in June, we have teams come together and talk about, okay, what are our practices? We look at all of our data, discipline, academics, participation in extracurricular activities, participation in advanced courses, and really take a look at where are we missing, where do we need to support teachers more so that our students can be successful, especially in our underserved populations or different demographics. Does that answer your question? Kinda.
Yes, it kind of does. Yeah. Thank you.
It's hard to answer a question like that in a relatively short answer. So I think that could be a good one-on-one conversation to have too, right? With Dr. Clarkson or Dr. Daniels or other people to get more specific about what are some of the things that are happening and to really understand what you should be able to expect from teachers and staff, no matter what school you're in the district. So having gone through all board members once, we'll again do a final open call for any comments or questions that may have come up over the course of the conversation.
I just wanted to add one thing, because I always call out acronyms when I see them on a presentation, and I noticed that Mary had a really nice list of what all the acronyms stood for on the disability compared to state slide, and I just wanted to say thank you, Mary. and it is up there, so that's all.
Thank you. I think that I have so many little windows up on my screen. I just wasn't seeing it as we were going, so I appreciate that. Anything else? Okay, I will turn it back over to the superintendent for the third and final item in the superintendent update tonight.
All right, so we are going to also have a conversation about vision cards, and we have presented vision card B and vision card D. And so while Scott is queuing up this particular presentation, today we're going to be talking about school culture and climate and some of the work that we do to measure how successful we are at engaging students, at reducing disciplinary incidences, and engaging families in the things that we're doing. And at any point, Scott can certainly start that particular presentation. And we will also have that queued up so that we can have the third of our 4 vision cards.
This is Superintendent Yanowski, and I am proud and pleased to present to you today our next in the line of 4 presentations around our vision cards. Vision cards are a way that we report our progress as a public accountability system that helps us to remain focused on our top priorities of our strategic. We have 1 vision card for each strategic plan strategy. We have already previously presented vision card B and vision card D, and tonight we will present vision card C. Vision card B looked at the comparison of our 2018-2019 data and our 2019-2020 data related to communications and engagement. In this presentation in the fall, we noted that we had improved our work across the board in student and family applications, student retention, and participation and engagement in activities related to school. In Vision Card D, as we examined the data between 2018 and 2019, and our current year, 2019-2020, related to our work in operations and our resources, that we've improved our work with our finances, our technology implementation, and we began to gather data and information related to our environmental impact, which will allow us to measure our progress moving forward. As we examine Vision Card C and the connection between 18-19 data and the data from 19-20, we're examining how we provide a welcoming, healthy, supportive, safe, and caring environment. This vision card speaks to the climate and culture of our schools. It reviews progress related to discipline, bullying and harassment, transitions for students between our schools, and the relationship between our families and our staff. Similar to our other vision cards, we can review our work from 18-19 and compare progress through much of 19-20. Each of the 2 cards examines data through the end of January. While we had planned to compare our data through the entire year, we no longer have school in person, so we'll need to be flexible and look at additional measures to measure our success. And when we examine our vision card from this year comparing to last year, what we can see is that we have reduced overall suspendable incidences and However, we have made very little progress in closing gaps in discipline incidences and referrals between white students and students of color. While I'm pleased with our overall reporting of a reduction and small amount of student bullying and harassment, I am concerned, and we all are concerned, about any and all bullying harassments as we commit to having the most positive environment. We also can note that we did not make significant progress according to our survey data with parents and their overall connection to our staff teams. We remain, as we examine the data, between 73% and 84% of our families reporting strong connections with our RPS team members. There also remains a nearly 10% gap when you compare the families of color reporting their connection to staff to the connection with families who are white. This outlines our ongoing need to improve our connection and communications with families, specifically those who have been traditionally underserved by our school systems. Well, we have also added communication supports and added expansions to our outreach team. Vision Card C shows that we continue to have significant work to do in supporting families and connections to all students, and again, particularly students and families of color. The consistently concerning results point to our ongoing need as we look forward to our next year's strategic plan to increase outreach, improve communication, and examine and deepen our equity work, consisting specifically of culturally appropriate and responsive communication, culturally responsive curriculum, and deeper and more effective social-emotional partnership work with all of our students and families in the future. You can see a deeper look at the data as we look at this particular slide, which shows the exact outcomes from our work. If there are any questions, I will entertain them at this time. Thank you.
And so just a couple of quick points of clarification before we jump into questions from board members. So obviously things were pretty fuzzy here. Scott was very clear that it is very clear and not fuzzy when things are being sent out over the internet on YouTube. This data gathers both duplicated and unduplicated information, which means that when we're counting suspensions and office referrals, we are both looking at students who are having one-time situations and when one student has multiple time situations and looking at those in comparison. We are also using survey data rather than just office referral data. So for example, we compare people's connection with our admin and with our teachers and their ability and feelings around connecting with them, using terms like openness and also ability to communicate back and forth. A couple of things to point out as we review the difference between duplicated numbers, those specific with multiple referrals or suspensions. As we talked about disparities, what we note is that disparities in suspension do not necessarily grow when we look at duplicated and unduplicated numbers. However, when we look at office referrals, we note a higher percentage or a larger disparity in office referrals for Black students and special ed students versus their white counterparts than we do when we look at just duplicated numbers for suspensions. One of the things that we note is some of the work with our social emotional teams and leadership teams are really focused on students who are having office referrals, helping them to have restitution, having them have restorative practices, and trying to find ways to help our students come from the office and become back engaged within our classrooms. So with that, I'm going to turn things over first to Director Cole to see if there are any questions.
Very clear presentation, and I don't have any questions at the moment. I'll pass it to Ms. Malik.
Thank you. I would agree. It's a clear presentation. There's definitely work to be done, but it's good that we can see this and follow it and see where the effort needs to go. So no questions. Mr. Paulus.
Thank you. You had mentioned the duplicated versus unduplicated from a student perspective, and so that I had asked or submitted a question related to that to see if there are, if there's a student who's chronically being referred or disciplined, is what our outreach are. So thank you for addressing that. Flipping that, is there a pattern where there are staff members who are overusers of the discipline and referral system? And what can we do to address that and see if that has an undue influence on, well, a lot of things, but very narrowly these numbers?
Right, so our social emotional staff and our social workers are doing a couple of things. One, they're trying to push into classrooms to provide students and staff supports within the classrooms to help the kids be successful. But additionally, similar to our instructional coaches, our social emotional staff help train staff and teach them ways to more effectively engage with students if they're having challenges. And the other thing that I would want us to all be aware of is that as we look at the data, and we do this within staff and within leadership team, we look at areas where there are staff with higher percentages of office referrals or higher numbers of office referrals, and typically find those in areas where either our peer reviewers from the QComp team or our instructional coaches, or even sometimes our administrators go in to help coach those staff and help teach them different and more effective ways to engage with students, to help both the students be more effective in that classroom and also the staff member to be more effective with the students.
Thank you. Just a question on the terminology on the vision card. It says openness with school administration proportional to student populations, or openness to child's teacher. What exactly does that mean?
I think that is we'll call it a mediocre verbal summary of the statement above. And I believe that it wouldn't all fit in the same place. So if you look at the wording above, number of parents reporting that they can discuss feelings, worries with child's teacher. And then the line below is openness with child's teacher proportional to student population. So openness there is a shortened version of reporting that they can discuss feelings, worries with a child's teacher, in a way to get it into that same box. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. So it's okay. Yes,
so it's the same data as above, just disaggregated.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I have no more questions. I will pass it to Director Smichek.
Thank you. As I was looking at the numbers comparing 2018-19 to 2019-2020 school years, I was wondering if just a little bit about the survey that you used, and wondering if you know if the responses are representative of district demographics, and wondering if there's any control for, like, are we hearing from the same people? Let me specify. Is this a sample? Are we using like a sample survey, or is it a district-wide survey?
This is the district-wide survey. We've worked very hard as a team to have that same district-wide survey with the same questions on a yearly basis, so we could compare our results from year to year.
Gotcha. Thank you. Then I will pass it on to Director Tensing.
All right. All the questions that I had have already been asked and answered, and so I appreciate that, and we'll pass on to Chair Brackey.
Thank you. I think, as Steve shared, the proportional to student population aspect of this is really concerning, and something that I think we all want and need to stay focused on. And especially now that we are not all in the same physical space. Just because we're not all in the same physical space doesn't change the reality of this for a lot of our students and families. And, thinking especially about the last three boxes here about, people feeling like they can discuss feelings and worries, whether it's with administration or teacher or support staff. That's more important now probably than it ever has been. And so I know that a lot of time and care is being put into communication at every single one of those levels and the type of outreach that we're doing. And so I think just because we're not in the physical building and some of these are essentially on hold for others, I think other things in this vision card are actually increasingly important. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to change the ways in which people are experiencing, and hopefully they are able to develop a greater sense of openness and trust that the concerns or the fears or experiences that they're having are going to be taken really to heart and going to be responded to in a way that feels caring and supportive and hopefully actionable. So that's all I wanted to say. No real question there. Want to give time for Diane and Naomi if there's anything that the two of you would like to share. Naomi, since I can see your face right now, I'm going to start with you this time.
I think I'm good for right now.
Okay. Diane, is there anything for you?
No, I'm good as well. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think you left something out there that does need a response, or at least I think. And so what I wanted to say is I think you're correct. Distance learning does provide a methodology for us to transform our relationship fundamentally with students and families. As we looked at the 1,700, almost 1,750 outreach contacts that we made in that first week, we are connecting with families in ways that we have never done before and at a much higher level. One example is we have moved from approximately 60% accurate phone and email information, despite multiple attempts to have correct information in the past, to well over 90% correct information at this time. So we are not only able now to communicate more effectively with families, and our staff is seeing that this information can get figured out and done, but we are also then doing that and connecting with families on a daily basis. And so this has made that communication and connection, as you pointed out, so much more vital and provides us an opportunity to really deepen that and continue to improve that in the future. So thank you for that.
Thanks for adding that in. I was going to give you a chance to have a last word. And it's really helpful to hear the big increase in terms of that accurate contact information that we have been able to get in recent weeks. So Steve, anything else before we officially wrap up the superintendent update section of the agenda?
Nope, that would be it for now. And I am excited to continue on moving forward.
Okay. The next item is approval of the consent agenda, which contains routine business items. As always, if there is an item that a member would like to remove for independent consideration, that could be requested at this time. Because this is a routine business item for us, I am not going to have individually the sort of cadence of board members individually having the chance to ask questions or comments, but rather we'll just pause for a moment to see if there are any questions or requests. So I'm looking across all of the screens that I see here. So seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
I will give that to Mr. Paulus. For a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Malik. Any discussion? And Christine will conduct a roll call vote to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishak?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brocky?
Aye, and the consent agenda is approved. Thank you. We move into new business where we have several new business items before us this evening. First is a renewal of group medical and dental coverage for our staff. So I will turn this over to our district's Chief Administrative Officer, Craig Holge.
Very good, thank you. I do have for your approval tonight the establishment of rates for medical and dental, as well as the deductible plans as recommended by the Insurance Advisory Committee. This plan year, we are recommending an increase of 1% in all of our premiums, as well as increasing our deductibles by $200 for each one of the single plans and $400 for the family and max out-of-pocket deductibles for each one of those plans. We are recommending that the dental insurance premiums be maintained at their current rates in place. This increases the rates to $686.18 for our lower deductible plan on a single and $1,671.36 on a family. And for our high deductible plan, it establishes the rates at $559.32 and $1,362.42 per month for the single and family respectively. The district's insurance plan has been under a self-funded program since 2012, and this is only the second increase in premiums that we've seen during that time period. We have had a 0% increase in every year except for in 2013 when we did a 4% increase in our rates. And so this is not something that we have done very frequently, but we're seeing that this year our increases in our stop loss and some of our fixed costs, as well as the expected claims, are expected to rise above our current funding levels. During this time period, we've also built a significant reserve of about 94% of expected costs is where we ended our reserve last year. So we have some opportunity to reduce those increases on a given year. And that's something that the Insurance Advisory Committee, when we started the self-funded program back in 2012, had recommended that we build a reserve so that we can mitigate increases and not have to take full increases in any year. The underwriters in this plan recommended between a 15 and a 22% increase in the expected claims, or projected a 15 to 22% increase in expected claims, which would have resulted in a 5 to 10% increase above our current funding levels. So with this recommended increase of 1% premium, as well as the increase in deductible, which accounts for about another % of expected costs, are recommending these moving forward here. So with that, there is some additional information that's included in the packet that the Insurance Advisory took a look at when making this recommendation, and we can look at that if there are specific questions, but that provides a lot of the detailed breakdown. Just a couple other pieces that the Insurance Advisory Committee took a look at and some actions we've taken. We did a Health Joy app, which is a benefits management support application. More importantly, provide our employees who are on the plan with a free online visit, which during this time of COVID has proven to be a great opportunity for them to seek medical care for some of those general medical questions and needs, much like an office visit for general care in that area. They're able to get prescriptions, refill prescriptions and things like that using that app. It does also provide some benefit management tools that we hope will reduce some of our expected claims in the future as well. As we talked about this, we've not made a lot of changes to this plan. A couple of years ago, we did increase some of our pharmacy copays as a small change, and at the same time put in a preferred pharmacy network where we were able to maintain that for some of the pharmacies that are lower cost pharmacies or have better arrangements with the insurance plan. And we also added a deductible waiver for joint replacement, bundled joint replacement with the mHealth, which has lower costs with our plan as well. So with that, I would turn for any questions. Otherwise, I'd seek the board's approval for those increases and establishing the rates with the deductible increases as well.
Thanks, Craig. Paula, we will start with you.
Okay, I don't have any questions, so I'll pass it to Ms. Malik. Thank you.
Nope, very clearly presented. Thank you. I will pass to Mr. Paul.
I don't have any questions. I'm on the Insurance Advisory Committee, and I appreciate the work that they've done working through this. As Craig said, it's a sense of real success for the plan itself, that this is only the first rate increase in 5 years, and the representatives from the bargaining groups who take their role very sincerely, understanding what it means when they are approving or recommending an increase for their own costs and their own cost share. So there really is the success of the plan has been because there is buy-in and ownership from the members who are our employees and their families who participate in it. And so I just appreciate how it's been done, and I'm very pleased to see this.
We'll pass it on to Allegra on Tim's behalf.
Hi, Allegra.
I do not have any questions. I'll pass it to Mr. Tensing.
Allegra,
having a
did.
little trouble coming off mute there. Sorry about that. So one of the things that we know about 2020, of course, is that healthcare utilization is dramatically different during 2020 than it has been ever before. And so that, of course, is going to have an impact, yes, on our costs this year, but also on our ability to forecast in the future. So obviously this is not a question that anyone can answer right now, but what I was wondering, Craig, is how do we do our forecasting? Are we, is that through Preferred One, the sort of who is administering our plan, or are we getting any other independent assessment? Just what is that? What are the mechanisms we use to try and forecast?
Yeah, so we really do have kind of a dual approach. So Preferred One, their underwriters take a look at our plan and our claims experience, but we also partner with One Digital, and they take a look at similar information in our underwriting. Over the last year, we purchased a deeper analytical tool that looks at our specific claims. And in some of the materials you'll see, it takes a deeper dive, especially on some of our higher cost claims, to try to project based on what the diagnosis is, where the experience has been, and where it's likely going. So it provides a deeper piece of information for us, especially on those high cost claims, which tend to be a driver for the overall claims experience. So we aren't just relying on one perspective or one role, but balancing that across multiple perspectives.
Okay, good, thank you. So, I mean, I think obviously, again, this is just going to be something that we'll have to bear in mind as we move forward, is the fact that 2020 being this substantial aberration, and we really don't know what sort of systemic impact this is going to have on healthcare delivery moving forward. It'll be interesting to see. I really appreciate Director Paulus' comments about sort of how robust the process is, and I think that's really critical, that the people who have the most stake in the outcome are also the people who are kind of sitting at the table. That's what gives me optimism that we can keep this going and do a good job with it despite the challenges. So thank you. Passing back to Director Bragi. Yeah.
Thank you. I also do not have any questions or comments. Very well covered. Don't want to leave out Diane and Naomi on the off chance they have questions about this. I would feel very badly if you did and I skipped over you. So Diane.
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, Naomi.
I'm also good, but thanks.
Okay.
You're on mute.
Thank you. I think I don't even know where I cut myself off. Having gone through all board members at once, we'll do a final open call for any last comments or questions. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
A second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Cole and a second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion? Christine will conduct a roll call vote.
Your mic, Christine.
Yep, you're on mute, Christine.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not on.
Okay.
Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tenzing?
Aye.
And the clerk votes aye. Ms. Brockie?
Aye. So the recommendation is officially approved. Thank you. Next up, we have several change orders for facilities work underway across the district. Craig Holge is going to provide an overview of all of the different change orders. We will have time for questions and or comments about any of these different change orders. And then what we're going to do is vote on each building's change orders individually, just to give you a sense of how we're going to handle this. So Craig, I will turn it over to you.
Very good, thank you. So the first change order we have is change order number 1 for Richfield Middle School. It is a credit of $2,601 for plumbing fixtures and some trade out of some equipment that we already have in place. That brings that total project down to $16,698,399. The next item is change order number 19 for Richfield STEM School. This is also a credit of $19,741.90 due to some revised work in bathrooms, adding an electric cooler outside of the cafeteria, a larger door frame in the boiler room, and some originally planned allowance for future equipment access. So that increase or reduction is $19,741, bringing that project to $15,288,199. Centennial Elementary change order number 2 is a net increase of $7,290 due to some modifications for tack boards, door hardware schedules, and then providing filtered HVAC registers in the kitchen area as required by the code officials. So that also is early on in the project. One of the questions that came up earlier was having to do with some of these code requirements. And one of the things we know is that there's codes that are in place that are in the design work, but sometimes you get into the actual buildings and you see something that needs to change, or also local officials will tend to have some different interpretations of the codes. And so we work with our local officials to make sure that we're at that local code level as well. And then finally, we have Richfield Dual Language School, which has change orders 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. This is kind of wrapping up a whole bunch of cleanup of some different changes that have occurred over the project, ranging from an addition of $13,628 for miscellaneous changes throughout the project, having to do with coiling doors, parking lot modifications, change order 18, which is an addition of $20,846 to construct smoke separations and barriers in the lower level mechanical and boiler rooms as required by code. This is one that there was somewhat of an existing condition, but when we were there, it was recommended by the local official that we modify that and bring that fully up to code as well. Change order 19 is $18,145 for some additional masonry patching in different project requests. Also looking at existing roof drains in the storm sewer systems and some other plumbing areas in that area. Change order 20 is an addition of $16,904 for the replacement of existing roof drain in the gymnasium and some work in the mechanical areas. Change order 21 is an addition of $23,682.84 for widening the sidewalk between STEM and RDLS to improve the bus drop-off and pickup. Modifications to the parking lot striping, and then some mechanical work as well. Change order 22 is for $22,705 for modifications to the gymnasium ductwork due to existing conditions and having to make some adjustments there. Change order 23 is an addition of $20,771 for boiler room modifications and some duct work and work in the media center. And then finally, change order 24 is an addition of $50,000 for ceiling and soffit modifications that occurred throughout the project and part of different areas. These total $186,891.61 in change orders as part of this series and result in a total project of $9,416,584. This is wrapping up the bulk of the change orders that we're anticipating from Richfield Dual Language School. We anticipate that there's one other change order that's in process that's being reviewed and evaluated with some negotiations between ICS Wold as well as Ellis Black. So that project is coming close to being wrapped up here. So with that, I would seek your approval for these change orders and see if there are any questions that I might be able to answer as well.
Thank you, Craig. And again, this is the time for questions or comments about any of these change orders, and then we'll vote on them building by building. So Paula, we'll start with you.
No comments. Go ahead to Ms. Malik.
No, my question was sent in advance, and Mr. Holge covered my question, so everything looks good. Thanks. To Mr. Paulus.
Thank you. Craig, first off, it's great to see a couple of credits thrown in there. We haven't seen many of those, so it's nice to see it happen. On the RDLS change order, there is the one on the sidewalk between STEM and RDLS. And so how is that decided to be assigned to the RDLS project versus the, shared?
Yeah, LS Black was responsible for all of the site work, both at STEM and at RDLS. So the parking lot project, that back entry, the drop off and pick up and the landscaping in that area was all part of LS Black's contract versus split between the two buildings.
Okay. And just I do hope this one's at the end. I note it's about 4.1% past its original, and I think our contingency was up to 5. And so It would be nice to see this land within the contingency. Thank you. That's all I have. I'll pass to Director Smishek.
I don't have any questions or comments, so I'll pass to Director Tenzing.
And I am also happy, so I'll pass it back to Director Bracke.
Thank you. I am also good. Thanks for all the information. Again, just don't want to leave our students out of anything. Diane, anything from you?
All good.
Okay. Naomi?
Get over here.
All right. Any final open call for comments or questions before we move to the first change order for voting? Okay. Seeing and hearing none. Is there a motion to approve Richfield Middle School change order number 1?
So moved.
I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Mr. Tenzing. Any final discussion? Christine will conduct a roll call vote.
Okay, Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tenzing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Bracke?
Aye. The change order is approved. We will now go to Richfield STEM School change order number 19. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Cole and a second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion? Christine with the roll call.
Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tenzing? Mr. Tenzing?
His video screen is frozen.
Yeah, I see
as I'm
that.
looking at this. So I think we may have temporarily lost him. So we will just bypass that and go on to you, Christine.
Okay, the chair. The clerk votes aye. Ms. Bracke?
Aye. The change order is approved. We move now to, oh, was that Pete just saying aye?
It was.
Okay, great. We'll officially have him as a yes. We will move to Centennial Elementary School change order number 2. Do we have a motion to approve?
Dialing in.
Okay, I think Pete's going to try dialing in on a different line, which is great. Do we have a motion to approve Centennial Elementary School change order number 2?
I move approval of Centennial Elementary School change order number 2.
I second it.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Smishek. Any final discussion? Christine?
Okay, Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
And Mr. Tenzing is not logged back in yet. So the clerk votes aye, and Ms. Bracke?
Aye. The change order is approved. And then last but not least, we have Richfield Dual Language School change orders 17 through 24. Do we have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion? And Christine with the roll call.
Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus,
Aye.
Ms. Smechek,
Aye.
and we still don't have Mr. Tensing, so the clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye. The change orders are approved. So we are going to move to our next new business item, which is really important as it is related to graduation requirements for the class of 2020. Superintendent Unowski will share the context behind this request to temporarily waive Board Policy 521, Section 4. And to Diane and Naomi, I'm just going to give you a heads up that I'm going to call on the two of you first to see if you have any comments or questions here, okay?
All right, so Board Policy 521 talks about credit for learning. It also has graduation requirements in there. And one of the graduation requirements is that between the junior year and senior year, or the end of the senior year, 15 hours of community service are required by our Board Policy 521 for graduation. In the spirit of what we've been doing in the state of Minnesota is trying to not hold people responsible when they are in a situation where they cannot help it. And so what I am asking tonight is for the board to create a temporary waiver of Board Policy 521 under the following conditions. That students who are unable to complete their youth community service due to the impact of coronavirus would be given a waiver of those 15 hours and would still be allowed to graduate. The principal would actually be given the responsibility of reviewing those requirements, working with the high school guidance team, and could waive this for students unable to complete the graduation requirement. So this would not be a blanket waiver because keeping in mind that students could begin at the beginning of their junior year and could have gone all the way through March. We are also having the guidance team has a set of resources and opportunities where students can actually volunteer online and volunteer community service to tutor younger kids, and can work with other people within the community online. So this would solely be for those who, for the extreme reasons related to coronavirus, would allow the principal to then waive that requirement and waive our Board Policy 521. So we're asking the board to create a temporary waiver for the remainder of this year, which allows and empowers the principal to make that decision. If there are questions, I'll turn it back to Chair Brecky.
Okay, we're gonna let the one member of the class of 2020 start off questions and comments here. So Diane.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, so when you say temporary, like, is the only other option to pick it up online, or would it just have to be like in the summer kind of thing?
The temporary waiver means that if you, Diane, had not done your hours of community service, you could have it waived, and temporary just means it's only for this year's class. And so it does not extend into next year. If we wanted one, and that's a good clarification to point out, if we wanted a waiver for the class of 2020, 2021, we would come back for another waiver.
Oh, okay. I did my community hours, but so then
Of course you did.
So then that would apply to, like, if you wanted to do 100 plus too, it would just stay at like the 15, like the minimum that you need, right?
Yes, it would basically say that if there were students who were not as productive and industrious as you are, Ms. Dayani, who weren't able to complete those hours, that wouldn't keep them from graduating this year in 2020.
Any other questions or comments, Diane?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Naomi.
I'm sorry, I don't have any questions.
That's okay. No need to apologize. We will start with Ms. Cole.
No questions. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, I would just say I am happy to hear that the option of doing online volunteering is out there, and that might be a possibility for students that want to. So I like the idea that it's not a blanket pass and that the opportunity is still available to our students. Thanks. Mr. Paulus.
I have no questions. Thank you. To Director Smechek.
My comment was the same as Director Malik's. I appreciate students having resources and ideas of how they might complete the community service hours. But I think that it is a good option given the circumstances. Director Tensing.
And I have no questions, so thank you.
Okay, I think not a question for me, but just a comment. I think especially as we're thinking more about waivers or, our school principals being charged with making these individual decisions, just making sure that we're putting some things in place as a system to guard against any unintended inequities by decisions being made on a case-by-case basis, and our principals being put in a really tough position by being asked to do that. So I just, I do have trust in Dr. Daniels and her team and your work with her, Superintendent Unowski, but I think especially as we're just considering a request like this that might be coming in over the coming weeks and months, that we stay attuned to that as well.
Thank you. That's a good point. Appreciate it.
Last call for any additional comments or questions before we would entertain a motion to approve this waiver. Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I move the temporary waiver of Board Policy 521, Section 4, service requirement.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion? I will turn it over to Christine for the vote.
Hey, Ms. Cole.
Aye.
Mr. Paulus.
Aye.
Ms. Mishak.
Aye.
Mr. Tensing.
I think I'm going to vote this time. Aye.
And the clerk votes aye. Ms. Brockie.
Aye. The waiver is officially granted. Finally, we will move on to donations to the district that have been made in recent weeks. Superintendent Unowski.
All right, so it is recommended that the Board of Education accept the following donations with gratitude. The Richfield High School Random Acts of Kindness Fund received $10 from Kristen Shack, a Target employee, through her employee giving campaign. So thank you, Kristen. The Sunshine Fund received donations of $135 through Give Minnesota from the following people: Michelle Burnside, $25, Lisa Ferrara, $10, and Anonymous, $100. So thank you, Michelle, Lisa, and whoever is anonymous. We appreciate your generosity.
Yes, thank you. And since this is another routine business item, we won't do the individual call on board members, but rather I will just pause to see if there are any questions or comments.
I would move approval of the donations with gratitude.
I second it.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Smishek. Any further discussion? Christine?
Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Mishak?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye. The donations are accepted with gratitude. So we move next into the advanced planning section of the agenda, as always, beginning with a legislative update. So I will turn it over to Board Member Pete Tensing to start with any update, and then we'll go to Superintendent Unowski from there.
Certainly. So the main action that I've been aware of, obviously everything at the legislature has changed substantially, and a lot of the things that we may have been interested in as our priority earlier in the year have kind of shifted and changed. But the main item that I'm aware of is an effort by the legislature to look at where we know that school districts are starting to encounter holes in terms of community service and community education and food services expenses, and some discussion around allowing school districts some flexibility with their budgeting to direct dollars from other funds into those particular areas. I'm unaware of any particular outcome on that, but something for us to be monitoring. Steve, what have you got?
So I think I just want to echo that. So obviously we already talked about the governor and the possible what are we doing next. But the specific bills that Pete is talking about, one is around food service. The other is around community education. And so what we really want to pay attention to is the area where user fees pay a significant amount of the income. And so if we think about meal service, there is revenue and expenditures. In terms of expenditures, we are staffed for a nutrition service of approximately 2,500 breakfasts and 2,500 lunches a day. And so that's about 5,000 a day. And at present, we are serving 2,000 meals a day. So about 1,000 breakfasts and 1,000 lunches. And so there's a hole there for about 3,000 meals a day that we are not currently serving, despite us serving at multiple sites and taking buses out and things of that nature. And so there's a pretty significant amount of revenue that comes into the district. Our finance team approximated that at somewhere in the range of possibly up to $300,000 that the district would then have to cover if that doesn't end up covered by the state. The other component is community education, which is also an area where funding is about user fees and people taking community education classes. And right now we are not collecting community education funds. We are examining options of offering classes online and at a distance, but at present that is not an amount of funds for us. We're also looking at an approximate $100,000 gap between revenue that we used to have and what our expenditures are, because we are staffed for these classes. And so one of the things that we have done over the years is be conservative as a district and be very tight with our funds and our fund balances. And so it does not look like we are in a position where we will be laying off staff. But it is important for us to note that as a state, there is the freedom and flexibility to lay off staff in areas where funding is not provided by the state or provided by the federal government. And so that is in nutrition and that is in community ed. So first I want to repeat, we are not, during the course of the school year, looking at laying off staff in those areas at present. But we are definitely closely monitoring to see if there is something that comes up in the coming weeks that is very different between our revenue and expenditure estimates. The best thing that could happen would be the state, and they are talking about it at the legislature now, is covering those revenue gaps that we have had in the past. And so we're very hopeful that those bills will move themselves forward. Crystal?
Thank you for that. I do think there, even just today, has been sort of increased awareness of this funding challenge, especially in nutrition services. And I think we should do our part to make sure people understand the way that community ed is being affected by this as well. So that was a really helpful update. Thanks to both of you. So we will transition right into time for any information and or questions members of the board would like to share with each other. We will start with Paula, who will pass it on from there.
I don't have any comments or requests at the time. Thank you, Ms. Malik.
I have no information or questions either. Mr. Paulus.
I also have nothing new. Thank you for covering the information on the budgeting and staffing, especially relating to food nutrition service and community ed. I think it is actually a good sign that we are in a position of relative financial strength, that we can weather this. I know there are neighboring districts that have had to take action, and while I understand why they need to take those actions, it'll be a very frustrating turn for our staff because we've asked a lot of them during this period of distance learning in on-site food nutrition staff. That's all I have. Thank you. To Allegra, please.
So, and as a response to that, I think it's really important for us to understand revenue and expenditures, right? So revenue is the money we are getting, which hopefully will be covered by the state. The only way other districts are saving expenditures is by laying off staff. And so that is what we're talking about, and something we are doing everything we can to avoid. Because cutting back on food service and sending it out and cutting back on bus transportation, the only way that actually saves money is by laying off the staff providing those services. And we as a board and we as a leadership team have decided that is not the direction that we want to go, which is a tribute to all the work that we have done to be really conservative with our finances and really careful to the best of our ability. Sorry about that. Allegra?
I agree with Mr. Paulus. So thank you. Mr. Tenzing.
So the one question I have relative to future items, and I just was looking for an update from the superintendent, perhaps. What is our thinking on when we will be getting, I know that you've had some thoughts about the strategic planning process, which obviously has been disrupted, And what is your current thinking on how that'll play out, how we can try to continue to move forward or make some interim progress? I think you had alluded to that in one of your letters.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. Our technology director, Corey Kling, and our communication director, Jennifer Valley, have been working together because we actually would be having a strategic planning meeting coming up later this week. And so we are going to have an announcement going out and a connection and ability for people to take those next steps online. And so where we are in the process, and I'll provide an update at our next board meeting, is for us to begin really prioritizing what are those top pieces of feedback and input that have been provided. And so we're going to be able to reflect back the input that people have given us, take a look at the things that are recommendations, take a look at the things that are information, and then really create the opportunity for people to tell us what are those top priorities for us to look at in the future. And so that is the next step in strategic planning. And then once we have those top priorities, we're really going to begin to narrow that down. And that should launch later on this week.
Great. Thanks very much for that. Then one other sort of operational point I wanted to just plant a seed in the chair's brain right now. Obviously, we have no idea what the months of June, July, or August will look like. Traditionally, of course, we've only had one meeting per month over those summer months. And maybe we could think about whether we want to do anything proactive. If there's any chance that we might need to have more meetings in order to be more responsive during the summer. Just something to put out there to be trying to plan ahead for as best we can. I'm good.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate that and have noted it. And I think especially given this really is our first meeting, even kind of dipping our toe back into more substantive conversations, we do have a lot to catch up on in terms of things that we normally would have been talking about in our in-person board meeting. So I think your point is very, very valid and super timely. So thank you for that. The one thing I was going to share is that there was a webinar hosted by the Minnesota School Board Association for metro area board chairs and superintendents last week. That was all about virtual meetings and open meeting law as it relates to the pandemic that we're in. And I just wanted to sort of publicly appreciate that after attending that meeting, I felt even more grateful for the level of preparation and readiness for our staff and our team here at Richfield. I feel like all things considered, we are in good shape. And so it was really affirming and helpful to see what a good position we are in relative to some of the questions that we could be dealing with right now. So appreciation to everyone for all of the hard work that's going into making our district just continuing to run feel possible and as smooth as it does at the moment. Naomi, is there anything that you would like to share with us before we get to adjourn? It actually looks like we might have dropped Diane. So Naomi, you are up.
I was waiting for her to go first, but I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. Our next meeting will be on Monday, May 4th at 7:00 p.m. The second meeting of May will be on Monday, May 18th, beginning with public comment. As always, we'll just kind of pause and do a call here for any items that board members would like to request for discussion on an upcoming agenda. Pete, thank you for already bringing up strategic planning and sort of where we are in the process and how we are going to revise and restart the work that has already happened there. Are there any other items that people would like to request? I'm kind of gonna just tentatively open this up and see what happens.
I don't have a future agenda item, but I did have one little bit of information that I forgot to mention from before.
Go ahead.
We did have our project oversight committee meeting, and I just wanted to share that they are still very actively getting themselves ahead of schedule, knowing that students still could come back in May, but they are really moving things along. If you've seen, they've posted some video and some pictures on Facebook of some of the progress. I think one of the things that they're working hard on and being very proactive on also is items that they have ordered that might have some supply chain issues. And they've already addressed some and are looking at alternatives to purchase instead. So I would just compliment the fact that they're being very proactive on that. And the meetings are very informative. That's it.
Thanks, Christine. That's a helpful update. And it's a sort of good reminder that there are committees that are continuing to meet and do work virtually. And then some of our other committees have taken a little bit of a pause, but we know are eager to get back going again. So thank you to staff and community members who are participating in these committees that provide the board with such helpful information and insights for our work. I'm gonna, Steve, check with you to see if there's a last call for anything that you would like to share.
The only thing I have an update on is we are continuing an overhaul and retooling of a website to make it even more user-friendly. And we hope to have an update or a preview for the board at our May 18th meeting, so we can take a look at what we might be rolling out or will be rolling out come July 1st.
Fantastic. Just quickly scanning to make sure nobody is coming off mute and getting ready to ask any final questions or updates before I take us to adjourn. Okay, so as this item does not require a full board vote, I will officially adjourn the meeting at 9:01 p.m. Have a good evening, everyone, and we will see you back here again on May the 4th. Good night.
Night.
Night.